Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex. This is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Dale Keown Day, so we're looking at the next issue of his Incredible Hulk run from the early 90s. This is issue 396, cover dated August 1992. Very few Dale Keown Incredible Hulk issues left before he moves on to Image Comics with Pitt, which we'll be looking at in the near future. But right now we're talking about this issue of the Incredible Hulk. Great cover, signed by Keown, 1992, and doesn't seem to have anyone else added in there. I do feel like this is him inking himself. As I've mentioned before on other covers where he's done that, his inking tends to be maybe a little grittier, a little bit dirtier, but very kind of hyper detailed. It gets cleaner throughout the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, right? His current art is very maybe more illustrative, I guess, than cartoony and comic booky. Still great, but there's still, I think, maybe more energy in what he's doing back in the 90s, right? The 90s were all about that energy, I think, in the artwork, and that's what still attracts me and lots of other people to that type of artwork. So again, yeah, inked by Keown, great representation of the Punisher on the left. We obviously got the Hulk on the right, pretty good cover. He's looking big, strong, and menacing. There's something I feel like, the Punisher in the way Dale Keown represents him has been great on the covers. There's that one pinup last issue, splash page, which could be a pinup, of the Punisher, which is great apart from the weird coloring. But the representation of Frank Castle within the comic, not as great. Last issue there was, that one shot I said that, the rare Dale Keown shots where the character looks weird and his eyes are really wide apart. So we'll look at more of that same kind of phenomenon, I think, in this issue here with the Punisher. Let's have a look inside. Credits. So Peter David, Dale Keown, Mark Farmer, Joe Rosen, Glynis Oliver, and we'll stop there. Great splash page to start off. Dr. Octopus is wholly in this first sequence and these first few pages, as you'll see, as kind of a rebuttal from the writer to Eric Larson. I've done the review of Eric Larson's last Spider-Man mini-series, I guess, right after Todd McFarlane on the Spider-Man title with no adjective. And in that one, Dr. Octopus has adamantium arms and is able to best the Hulk. That was written in that story. And for some reason, Peter David, who writes the regular title, really took it personally. Some really weak egos in the comic industry, I guess. I don't know. These are all made up characters, right? So, Kirby famously said, any of his characters could, thwart or beat any other character, by thinking of a way out of the situation, no matter who it is and who they are, right? And that's a little bit of magical thinking, I guess, where, when you're writing stories, yeah, you can pretty much do what you want, right? You can find a way out of a situation by writing your way out of it. But yeah, this kind of ego battle that went on, at least for a short while between Eric Larson and Peter David, and I guess morphed into Peter David and then Todd McFarlane and their whole kind of situation that they had there in the early 90s. Whatever. So basically what Peter David aims to do with this sequence here is settle the score a little bit with Eric Larson, set the record straight that, Dr. Octopus could not in any way come close to defeating the Incredible Hulk. Before I turn the page, I will mention all these Doc Ock expressions from different angles from Dale Keown, and this kind of thing. I realize I think he does it in Pitt as well, and I like that he's doing it here. Is this deal where like that kind of, I don't know if that comes from manga at this point in the early 90s, probably. Like, I'm not quite sure. Maybe other comic book artists in America were doing that, but this kind of, whatever you want to call these lines here, expression lines, or the sense of surprise, basically, is what's meant to be emanating from his face, right? So in the profile here, it's done this way. Here, he's kind of doing it maybe more traditionally, but Inker's throwing in some thick brushes there for those lines, which makes it a little more chaotic and, really drives home the point that Dr. Octopus was very angry with some Keown spittle between the teeth, once again, and over here as well. Yeah, over here as well. That's probably in every shot of Dr. Octopus with his mouth open. Oh yeah, there we go. I could have bet on that. Dale Keown occasionally has this kind of contrasty black and white designy elements in the background to just differentiate and move stuff left, right, and not have to draw too many backgrounds. It's kind of more of a design element than anything else. I think it works well. It's like a cast shadow, really. Excuse me, I don't want to edit, so I will be leaving that in. Yeah, so let's move on from, again, this whole sequence is just to justify that the Hulk is way stronger than Dr. Octopus. Peter David set the record straight, I guess, and then we can move on. Still some interesting screen tones being applied within this issue on some of the details, on Captain Octopus. Dr. Octopus's costume here. And again, we're getting all throughout this issue. I don't know if I didn't notice them before, or if maybe he's just started using them. I don't know, but these kind of things that I just mentioned with Dr. Octopus's face has got another kind of cool one here. Expression lines, in some sort of a perspective, right? It emanates kind of from the middle is basically the idea, but just more chaotic than regular perspective. And of course, we've got the Dr. Octopus spittle one more time here with his mouth open. Almost looks like his tooth gets chipped here, or maybe he has a gap. No. Doesn't have the gap here, so I don't know if that's a character trait of design element of Dr. Octopus. Does he have a gap like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to have back in the day? He got that fixed, right? You know that. So we're back to, Green Hulk acting like Mr. Fix-It back in Vegas. Some more great artwork, pretty much. I love this two-page kind of, almost like there's two splashes, right? Not a double splash. Change of scenery, right? And again, the cool kind of shot here of the character with the insert panels for storytelling. You've got the same kind of phenomenon here. The one thing I want to mention for this issue is, apart from this page here, right? A lot of the backgrounds actually are tending towards kind of the image fad of not being quite as detailed, right? Not being quite as present, but Dale Keown more than makes up for it with the foreground figures, the characters and stuff who are extremely well drawn. So a good example of that here, of the figure drawing, but also one page where he didn't cheap out on the background. I think I know the reason why, is this splash right here, okay? So here's an example of, when an artist is familiar with certain objects or certain things you can be called to draw in a comic book. If they're familiar with those objects, they're going to draw them really well. So Dale Keown, first of all, is a great anatomy and figure drawer. So the character here looks great. The drummer has a believable drummer position. I gotta give him props for throwing in the Spinal Tap reference here on Rick's shirt. But for any of you out there who don't know anything about guitars, if those of you out there who do, you can definitely recognize not just the fact that this is a guitar, but the specific brand and shape. Pretty sure this is a Telecaster, right? With the way the buttons are set up and the shape of the guitar and all that. So it's a very specific guitar, and it's drawn masterfully, I will say. Very, very, very true to what a Telecaster should look like. The amp in the back here, although he's kind of obscured the name, I feel like that's Arshall is what I see there. So it's like a Marshall amp. Even though we don't see much of it, pretty convincing. That is what an amplifier looks like. And all the knobs that you use on an amplifier. And then when it comes to the drums, I feel like Dale Keown knows about guitars a lot, maybe a little less about drums, where the drums are pretty well drawn because, from playing in a band, he probably observes them a lot, just kind of casually, offhandedly, right, while he's practicing the stuff. So the drums are a little less kind of on model and a little less realistic in their depiction, but he definitely knows guitars. And why do I mention all that? Well, I do play musical instruments. I play drums, I play guitar, play keyboards, and I play bass. So I'm pretty familiar, and those are the kind of things I'm pretty good at drawing generally, and I can draw pretty well, even from memory. When it comes to things like, for example, back in high school, I was kind of the kid, in the class who drew well, relatively well, I guess, compared to most of your classmates. And then you go to college and you meet tons of artists who are better than you, and it's very humbling, and that's fine. But when I was in high school, I had a friend, who's like, "Oh man, you can draw this and that looks cool. Draw a mountain bike," and he was really into mountain bikes. And I was like, I can't just draw a mountain bike. I'm not that, I have a bike, but I'm not that familiar with all the parts and what, the components are, and you'd have to know all that to be able to draw it properly. He's like, "Hey man, I could draw a mountain bike." I'm like, "Well, of course you can," because, he's this guy who was a mountain bike aficionado and, bought parts and fixed his own bikes and stuff. So of course, in that case, even though he's not necessarily any kind of trained artist, he more than likely could draw a much better bike than I could, or a much better mountain bike. So it's contextual, right? But here's a good example where, like I said, you know, knowing that Dale Keown is a musician, he would be very familiar with guitars, and draws a mean guitar on this page here. Still going with this kind of Rick's mother kind of B story here. I guess he finally forgives her here, but then there's like some weird kind of zoom in on her face, so that implies, you know, some sort of dastardly stuff may be coming up and she's not quite what she seems, or, you know, it's comic book, so you start to expect that. Obviously, as a kid, I wasn't necessarily picking up on that right away. So here they're basically they're doing a sting on these guys, on these mafia guys, right? They've offered, I guess, what is cocaine or drugs in the Marvel universe, and, you know, eventually to find out that, you know, he gets thrown in his face. What is this stuff? Cremora, you put in coffee, so it's basically like coffee whitener, not actual drugs. Chaos ensues. Want to say some great screen tone here. I feel like this issue has less screen tone than maybe there's been in the past. Now this page is kind of making a liar out of me because there's a bunch here and a bunch here. But just overall, he may be moving away from that slowly as much as he did in the last few issues, and I think it looks great and it works. It's awesome. But maybe knowing at this point, he probably has a good idea that he is going to be going on towards Image Comics, and maybe there's less screen tone going on there. You know, by now he's seen a lot of comics. The color probably compensates for a lot of that screen tone that they want to use and stuff. You know, not the typical flat coloring of the Marvel comics, but, you know, a little more modeled, and maybe you don't need to add in so much of that screen tone for those different textures. So moving away from that slowly. Maybe that's, you know, it's a hypothesis. I don't know for sure. So this guy's Mr. Chill, right? So we finally kind of find out. We saw a bit of it earlier on, but now we see that, you know, he can freeze you, I guess. So he's a big, strong guy like the Hulk, and he's got like Iceman powers. It's kind of an odd mix. Of course, the Hulk is the Hulk and breaks out of it pretty easily because Hulk is the strongest, right? Another last bit of screen tone use here. Bit of an overlap with the panel there. That's some production issues, but nothing major. And this is an odd one because all of a sudden the Hulk just grabs his head and it breaks off or pops off. Right? I'm ahead of my time. Cracks a joke and explodes. Yeah. So we're back with Frank Castle here, who we've barely seen in this issue. Yeah, kind of ends on a funny note, I guess, with this guy's head exploding. Not the greatest story, I guess. Not that I'm interested in that in the least, to be honest. But the artwork looks good. As with most Dale Keown issues, it starts to lag a little bit at the end. I always feel like his last page is like cramming a lot of story into a bunch. It usually has a lot of panels and like just trying to finish up. Also probably doesn't spend as much time on the finished pencils. So definitely, I've talked about this before, the mid shots and the far away shots look less and less like Dale Keown and maybe a bit more like what Mark Farmer himself would do, the inker. Yeah, just not the good artwork generally and overall throughout the issue, just not story-wise anything that interesting. I have said that there's a few issues here and there that I think are great stories in this Incredible Hulk run, but personally I'm just not a big Peter David fan or fan of his style of writing. Again, mostly looking at these issues for the art, and I would say overall this one doesn't disappoint. Promises of things to come with Pitt soon. So there you have it. That is my review of the Incredible Hulk issue 396. Those of you who are subscribed, who are still watching, thank you so much for being out there. Really appreciate your support. Those of you who are watching but are not subscribed, there's still a high percentage of you. Please, it takes only half a second. Click on the bottom subscribe, and it really helps out the channel, helps get us out there to more people who more than likely have the same interest that we have, which is interest in comic books. So thank you again for watching, and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!